All right, this is the Divine Comedy. The first thing anyone should say about the Divine Comedy is that it is an absolute masterpiece. Um, everybody knows it. Dante knows it. He doesn't really mind telling anybody. So that's the first thing you need to understand is that this um, collection or this poem, it's a single poem broken into three parts, is it's a work of art. It is an absolute masterpiece. Um, and it's not just a poem or a book. Um, it's much deeper than that. It's how did I put it here? It's a roadmap to salvation, somewhere between a Catholic fan fiction and an apocrypha, as if to say, um, this is real. Dante certainly believed it. Um, the very last end of the canto, or the very last end of the poem, the final canto, Paradisia 33, um, we get to see the Godhead and all of that and the Imperium. And Dante believes he was actually there, much like Paul in the Bible, where he ascended to the heavens and, got to meet everybody there. Um, so, the very, very end of the Divine Comedy is supposedly real. And everything before is inspired by Dante's real life, Dante's experiences, his philosophy, his theology, and it is presented in an effort to explain the final cantos, where we're actually in the Imperium um, and seeing the Godhead. Uh, so, that's kind of a lot to wrap your head around in the very beginning. But it covers key themes such as salvation, sin, redemption, love, politics, and of course, my favorite theme is the quest for knowledge. It is why we picked this topic, and that brings us to what we're doing here. Um, this video is being made for a study group. What I hope is that people will watch this, have questions, and then we can address those questions in the videos to follow. We want to cover the entire um, Divine Comedy in detail, including Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, which is a very, very, very long journey. It's an epic in every detail, except for one quick fact, is that the epic is the hero's journey, but here we will be seeing the lover's journey. So politics, that brings us into one of the major criticisms that people have of the Divine Comedy. A lot of people don't like it for their own reasons. A lot of people don't understand it. But one of the main criticisms that you'll hear is that Dante has used this to basically get the last word on his political enemies from exile. Can't do anything about it anymore, so I'm gonna sit around and write trash about them and put them down in hell and whatever else. A lot of it is pretty harsh down there in hell. So people see that as sort of petty. I see it a little bit more akin to something like the Roman occupation in the Gospels. Um, the political problems that Dante faced was quintessential to his life and his views, and obviously the result of this comedy. Um, we'll start with the disagreement they had. In Florence, it was controlled by the Roman Empire, and uh, some folks didn't really like that. Dante was a Guelph. They supported the Pope. Ghibellines supported the Emperor. When the Guelphs won, they had a split. Let's see here, just so I get this right. The White Guelphs wanted to limit the Pope's influence over Florence while still to maintain the autonomy for the city. So, White Guelphs didn't want the Emperor, but then they didn't want the Pope either. They were Catholic. They believed in the Pope. They were sort of like a render unto Caesar what you should to Caesar, render unto God what you should to God. Um, they wanted Florence independent. But the Black Gulfs were much more pro-papal, meaning that they supported the Pope's rule. They wanted the Pope to proceed over Florence in all of its affairs. Um, so the blacks won that argument, and Dante was exiled. Which brings us to our next point: is a little bit of timeline here. Um, Dante was exiled in 1302 of the Common Era, and this poem is set in 1300, and it is written from about 1304 to 1306, somewhere in there it starts, to 1320, which brings us to the final year of Dante's life, 1321. So the poem is set before Dante's exile, which I left that out. That happened in 1302. So quick review. 1300, the comedy starts in real time. 1302, in the real world, Dante is exiled. 1304 to 6, he starts writing the comedy. 1321, it's complete. And the whole thing is set, 1300 from Good Friday to Easter morning. This gives Dante the power of hindsight. He can write things into the comedy that have already happened as if they're going to happen. We'll see that Dante is confronted with different problems that he's going to face, things like the exile. So that pretty much covers sort of the politics and timeline. Let's see. Oh yeah, the next thing is that this poem is a poem for the people. This is very, very rare, perhaps even unheard of. I'm not real sure about that. But to write things for the common people with this kind of detail and depth. The poem is the first thing to be written in the Tuscan dialect of Italian vernacular, which is the way that regular people spoke. And today, here in 2024, somewhere around 30% of the words used in the Italian language were standardized by Dante himself. It's Italian is often referred to as Dante's language. He completely revolutionized the way that people write to speak. It's kind of a strange thing because we take it for granted so much today, because pretty much everything, or not everything, but there's so much available for people to read that it's hard to even imagine a time where there just wasn't anything for you to read unless you were properly educated in Latin, or whatever it was that your leaders were using. So Dante broke a lot of rules. He was he was out in exile, and he wasn't exactly too concerned with um, keeping secrets. So definitely a man of the people. Um, Another thing we notice is that Dante has some very strange views for a medieval devout Catholic. Things like, or we'll say groups of people, such as like the gays, the Jews, Muslims. These were people who would clearly, almost obviously, be seen at in pretty negative lights. But Dante doesn't do that. We'll see as we get to the different parts, but just as a quick example, there is an area in hell where people who are obsessed with money, usury, things like that, they're, paying for their sins there, and we do not see a single Jew there. And it's it's subtle. He doesn't basically come out and say, "Oh, that whole thing about Jews stealing everybody's money isn't true." He just simply doesn't put them in the part of hell where people are obsessed with money. So little clues like that throughout. We'll see that Dante had some progressive. Really isn't the right word because current politics have used that word for their own means. We're not going to get into any sort of current day politics. It's too messy. But what we see is that Dante has a very forward thinking sort of point of view. And that goes a lot further than just things like social progressiveness. It is like, we'll see how Dante's views will change through the comedy, whereas typically in Catholic religions, if you're not baptized, you can't go to heaven. That's the rule. But we see Muslims in paradise. We see, we'll get into all of it. I don't want to cover too much right now, but it is a key thing to know going forward that this isn't going to be your typical 1300 point of view. Let's see here. Yeah, another thing going on there that kind of ties in with the vernacular language as well as the forward thinking is that this comedy marks a transition in art between medieval style and Renaissance style. Things are going to become more lifelike, more lively. You'll see, clearly if you look back through, Italy's history, right around, 1350, things change. Paintings become, more beautiful in a way that it's like something that would appeal for a person to look at rather than a object to represent something or a testament to something. Renaissance art is appealing to people, while medieval art is appealing to themes, perhaps. I'm not an art expert, but we will definitely see both medieval and Renaissance styles being fused together at this turning point of, I guess, human consciousness. So that pretty much covers just a lot of the overview. So we'll get into some specific details that we'll need to cover before we actually get into the cantos. First of all, there are 3 parts to this poem. There's the Inferno, which is the most fun part. It's one of the most referenced things ever, perhaps next to the Bible, Shakespeare, Homer probably. Well, I guess the Greek pantheon in general probably gets a lot more love than, the Divine Comedy. But until you actually have sat down with the comedy, you miss a lot of references throughout, everything you've ever watched. Let's see, I've got some pretty cool examples here. Just some quick ones that would, like the movie Seven. Let's see. The TV series Soprano is littered with references to the Inferno. Let's see. Let me get one more here. Well, it sparked plenty of video games and films and things of that nature. Usually, when people when people reference things like the comedy, it's typically pretty subtle. So, as you're going through the comedy, you'll probably have plenty of moments where you'll be like, "Oh, that is funny," So, but yeah, that's part number 1 is the Inferno, the most popular part. The part everybody seems to find something in it they like. You have a lot of fun, like thinking to yourself, like, which circle do I belong in? But that'll take us on to the next part, where we're dealing with purgatory. Um, Purgatory is a lot like the Inferno, but instead of being humiliated, that humiliation fuses into a humility. Um, if you can think in the Inferno, people are obsessed with um, they're obsessed with things. They're obsessed with stuff outside of themselves. And then in purgatory, you're dealing with the problems within and coming to terms with that, and um, basically taking all the things that have humiliated you and turning them into humility. That's the key theme of purgatory is accepting yourself. Finally, we have the Paradiso, and this part is super serious. Um, it's also really hard. It's it's hard for Catholics. It's hard for um, non-Catholics. Just Christians in general. It's hard for it's hard for the reader. You know, a lot of the time, Dante finds himself without words, uh, and Dante even warns us. When we get to it, he says, something along the lines of like, Inferno and Purgatory. They're cool and all, but things are going to get serious when we come into the paradise, and if you're not in the right place, then you probably shouldn't come onto this journey with him. Just go ahead and stop, you know, go back over the other two. Um, get yourself in a place where you're ready to see the Godhead, because that's what we are going to do in his wake. Um, so that pretty much just covers the three parts. Um, and let's see. We'll get into the main characters. First of all, we have Dante, of course. Dante is a super cool guy, but we're not really going to get much into his biography. It's super important, but I'm no expert, and there are plenty of YouTube videos, documentaries, and other things that go into his personal life, and maybe we will do that at some point, but that won't be our focus here. Um, let's see. We've covered his political position in the war. Dante was a white Guelph who's really wanted political autonomy for Florence. Um, he liked the Pope. Well, he didn't like the Pope, but that's beside the point. We'll get to that. But he wasn't against the church, um, but he was not in support of their rule, if you will. Like I said before, render unto the state what you should, and render unto God what you should. You mix the two up, nobody's going to have a good time. Let's see. We've also covered a little bit of the timeline there. Dante plays two roles in this comedy. He is the poet and the traveler, and that brings us to what some people will call the fourth wall. You see in a lot of stuff. My favorite comic book guy, Deadpool, is very famous for breaking the fourth wall. It's one of his superpowers. He can just, speak right out of the comic book to the reader, or just make commentary on things that have nothing to do with the universe that he exists in. So Dante does things like that, but there is no fourth wall breaking, at least not in my opinion. There's a little bit of disagreement about this, but the way I see this is that you have the Divine Comedy, where we have Dante as the traveler, and inside of that is where we'll travel through the different levels. The 9 levels of, or the 9 circles of hell, the 9 levels of purgatory, the 9 cosmos, and within all of that, is Dante as a traveler. And then just outside of that, you have um, Dante as a poet who is with us. And that is part of the story. Dante, as a poet, will speak to us and say, well, look what's going on here. Um, and then you have the walls. So I like to imagine it that we, the reader, are actually on this journey with Dante from a personal third person point of view, where we get to sit beside Dante and watch Dante go through this journey. And every once in a while, the poet will turn to us and address us in whatever kind of appropriate matter. Um, so it's not really a fourth wall break if you're in the story along the way. But people will still refer to when Dante the poet speaks as a fourth wall break. But again, I just don't see it the same way as something like a comic books, just shouting out something to the person reading it. Um, so that pretty much covers Dante and what his role is here. Um, the next person that we'll cover is Beatrice. She's a lovely lady. Everybody loves Beatrice. She's Dante's muse. You'll see Beatrice is perhaps the most important thing to Dante in a. How do I put this? From a poet's point of view, she is his muse. I have another little book here, The New Life, where it basically goes into Dante's infatuation with Beatrice, how they met, and things like that. There's a lot more going on in that little poem book, but you really get to see a lot of Beatrice and who she is. Let's see. Beatrice represents divine wisdom, and she is Dante's guide. We won't see her. Well, we will see her. I think in the second or third canto, maybe even the first. She shows up very early, but then she goes away, and she'll come back. But we'll get to all those details. But basically, all you need to know is that she represents wisdom, and she will be the guide for the Paradiso. Let's see. Little is known about her personal life. She was born about 1266 in Florence to a wealthy banker and politician. She met Dante when she was 9. Or she met Dante when he was 9. She was likely 8. 9 years later, they met again. Dante was infatuated with her from the moment that he saw her, and it's pretty common for these Florentine, around the 1300s, or I guess 13th century, because this would have been before 1300. So we're looking the 13th century, around, I don't know, 1270 something, when Dante was, getting his putting himself in his own right as a master poet. Beatrice was his muse, and to really understand that, you kind of have to look at the New Life, or just have a general understanding of how poetry worked then in those circles. But moving on from that, the nature of their relationship is, a lot of people like to make rumors about it and things like that. I don't believe any of it. I think Dante lays it out to us pretty straightforward. There is such a thing as a screen woman in the New Life, but I don't think there's anything particularly scandalous about it. It's not like he's saying he was hooking up with her secretly on the weekends. Like they were both married and things like that. But there is a woman that that is not identified that he speaks on, that a lot of people assume he's using as a screen to express his love for Beatrice. Unfortunately, Beatrice dies about age 24 or 25, and the causes are lost to history, but we assume it has something to do with her sex. probably like childbirth. Um, we don't know. And it's just kind of sad, because if you really like Dante, you begin to just love Beatrice because he does, and then the sad story and all. So it's that's Beatrice. Next, we'll be moving on to Virgil or Virgil. Sorry, he is the last character that we'll actually cover, and he represents the pinnacle of human reason. He also serves as a guide for Dante through the Inferno and the Purgatory. Let's see. Let's get some facts on him. All right, so Virgil is pre-Christ, and very soon we'll discover that if you were born before Christ and you're not extremely special, then you're pretty much stuck outside of. Excuse me. You're pretty much stuck outside of the paradise. Um, you can go all the way up to the gate, or all the way up to the garden, the top level of purgatory, which is the Garden of Eden. You can get right to there and can't go no further. Virgil is he comes from pagan times. He was born, let's see, October 15th, 70 BC in Andes, which is now northern Italy. So, kind of about the same area as Dante, but not really near Florence. Mantra, I believe. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, to be honest with you. But that's closer to that area. He came from a family of modest means, probably peasants, educated in rhetoric, philosophy, poetry. He made good friends with Augustus, who eventually became the Emperor of Rome. So, pretty good guy to be friends with. He died September 21, 19 BC. So, what's that put him? About 51 years old or so? He died on a journey to cure his illness and left instructions for his great unfinished work, the, I can't ever say this correctly, the Aeneid, to be destroyed, but Augustus wouldn't have it, and that is the epic poem that we have today. Let's make this thing pronounce it for us correctly. Well, come on and say it.
Of Latium. Anchises, Aeneas' dad, dies during the journey, but in book 6 of the Aeneid...
Aeneid. Kind of said it right. Anyways, that is a very popular epic poem as well. Alongside things like, the Odyssey and different things like that. Dante sees Virgil as a master above himself. You'll see him refer to Virgil as his master throughout the comedy, which is an interesting point because Dante is the master pretty much of the time. He's, in his own opinion and in many other people's opinions, he is the master of the Italian language. So let's see. Yeah, so that one last point, his final work remained unfinished, but the emperor said it was so good that we had to have it. And here's a little bit of a hot take. I think that Virgil is transcending, especially in the Purgatorio. There are moments where Virgil seems to understand more about Christian love and grace than he is actually giving credit for. While Virgil does indeed go back to his place in limbo, I feel that if we followed him back down after the business with Dante is complete, that we would see him ascend all the way back up to the Godhead. I just feel like, given what we see after we leave Virgil, um, I just can't see a case where he's not eventually going to ascend. Um, but people argue with me. I've I don't see how this is not the case. But even the AI Grok, he says no, Virgil's never going to heaven. Okay, so that kind of covers the characters and a little bit of background. So we'll get into the one last thing for this video is the levels. Exegesis. How we will understand medieval poetry. There's 4 different things going on. You have the literal, the allegorical, the moral, and the analogical. All 4 of those are being used at the exact same time, most of the time, throughout the entire comedy. So, we'll use a, slap, like a slap in the face. So, literal, straightforward. What is actually happening here? A slap is a slap. That's it. Let's see here. In the comedy, the literal level involves Dante's physical journey. We'll see him actually in the Inferno, actually taking steps, actually talking to people. And that is the context in which you're supposed to understand it. This is just a literal telling. Allegorical, symbolism at play. So, what does it mean to have a particular character slap another particular character at a particular time in a particular place? This all must mean something, like nobody just goes around slapping people. Like there's got to be a subtextual meaning for like why this character did this. And it won't come out and say it because that would be literal. You're supposed to get that subtext on your own. Let's see, moral. What can we learn from it? Given the slap, how we can apply that slap to our lives and how we can use it to shape our future. How we can use it to further ascend. How we can take this lesson that we learned by slapping or being slapped or whatever happened, apply it to our own lives and get something out of it. Analogical are the spiritual truths. How did that slap stand all through time as the slap to be slapped until the end of time? The infinite wisdom of the Torah, basically. What is going on? Like what is the actual deepest point? The kind of thing where like you read a story and you think you know the story, and then something happens with your wife or husband, and then you're like, oh, now I get what that guy was saying. Like how does this like integrate like into everything? Like why does it truly matter? Like beyond like the subtext or the moral or the literal thing going on, like where is the divine nature of these words? So at most parts, you're going to have Dante giving thought to all 4 of these levels and expressing them all in different ways, with the same words. All like every word will have multiple levels to it. And that is an infinite challenge. It's the kind of thing that makes a text like the Divine Comedy inexhaustible. You can't read it enough. You'll never master it, and as time goes on, the comedy will change. Just like, the Bible today means different things to us than it did to people in Christ times or people in Moses times or even Abrahamic times. So you'll have like a text that can evolve. So that is basically the different levels that we'll be dealing with. So that brings a conclusion to this video. Our next video, will probably release right alongside this one. It'll cover Cantos 1 through 4. We'll just jump right in and just get right into Dante in the Dark Woods. So, if you've taken the time to watch this video, I thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I want to share the Divine Comedy with people so I can learn more about it for myself. So, any kind of question you have, please leave it in the comments. I'm also I'm opening a Discord where I'll be posting these videos in a forum setup. So it won't really be like a Discord server where there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages, people talking about what they had for lunch and whatnot, which is great, but you know, we're going to try to be a little bit more focused. I'll have it set up in forums, so each topic will have its own section so you can quickly get to it and then jump into the conversation there. And of course, we'll have little social sidebars and things like that, but I want people to engage with these videos. Not necessarily a lot of people, you know. If we get, you know, 5-10 users who are interested in this topic, if we get 2 users who are interested in this topic, I will continue to engage. This is every bit as much for me as it is for you. Hopefully we'll all learn something together. So check down in the links and stuff. I'll leave a description. And also down in the description, I'll also be leaving a little bit of a credits section. The Divine Comedy is extremely challenging, and I would not have been able to get through it on my own, at least not with the level of understanding I feel like I have. There are 2 main sources that I will recommend, and one is Mark Vernon. He writes on the Divine Comedy, and he has a podcast that covers each individual canto in great detail. I highly recommend looking at that. There's a YouTube version of it. I don't really like his videos as much. No hate or anything, but I would just rather listen to Mark Vernon talk about the Purgatory, or talk about the Divine Comedy. The other source that I use is right here. These bad boys right here. Alright, there we go. They are the Oxford Divine Comedy. It's by, let's see, it's Durling and Martinez. Those are 2 different guys. Together, they translated it, and they also offer extensive notes. There is, their translation is done in a style that is more prose rather than form. We didn't cover it here because I don't really care about it. The rhyming form that Dante uses, the Teresa Rima, I don't really get it. It's kind of, you know, above me. But a lot of translations will try to take that into consideration. This one does not. It's just the prose. It's like trying to tell you like what's going on here. And the notes are great. They are they're simple, but not light. You know, they're user friendly enough for your general reader, but they're informative enough for a scholarly level. So, you know, that's kind of exactly what we want here, where we're just, you know, reading and learning things for our own benefits. Sort of an amateur scholar. And also, one last mention is the AI system Grok. I use that a lot to organize my thoughts, to outline things. Also for clarity. Sometimes you think you know something, and if you run it through the AI system, it'll just be like, oh, no, you got that totally wrong, and here's why. And then you learn something. So, like I said, thanks again for watching the video, and, you know, hopefully you'll watch the next one, Cantos 1 through 4. Have a great day. Bye.